Resident Evil.
Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City was released in 2012 for PC, Xbox 360 and PS3. It was so badly received that it's been essentially erased from the Capcom catalogue, with it being extremely hard to play, even in emulation. There are several reasons for this and we'll get into them, but I do think there is a diamond of an idea buried in the rough that I would love to uncover. This is a series where I look at games that are much maligned and see what small changes could be made to bring them to life. Or death in this case. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City was a game that had you control a member of Umbrella's Special Ops D team, codenamed Wolfpack, as you carried out secret objectives during the Raccoon City disaster of the main games. You would have to battle the hordes of zombies that had infested the city, extract secret files that indicted Umbrella as the cause of this incident, and destroy any witnesses. There was a focus on online play. The campaign was supposed to be played cooperatively, and you were encouraged to play online with friends and strangers. Each player would play as a different member of the Wolfpack, all of which had their own unique class and abilities that you could unlock and upgrade with in-game points. There was also online competitive play, with players entering ranked matches with real-life players. Each match would be played in a part of Raccoon City in a closed map, with familiar goals and objectives such as Team Deathmatch. You'd be part of the Wolfpack or against them as members of a government Spec Ops team. While fighting your enemies, you'd also have to avoid familiar Resident Evil monsters that would prowl around the map and create an extra obstacle. What went wrong? This is a difficult question to answer, not because it is hard to identify, but there is actually a fair bit of crap to pull back from. I'm choosing to ignore the performance issues, but they do not help this game one bit. I originally got this game on release for the Xbox 360, and I remember it being dodgy at the time. Sadly, I no longer have the game or the console, and it's just impossible to find nowadays unless you emulate at like 10 FPS, with the sound turned off, as the sound files are a huge factor for the game's lag. But let's pretend this game had a bit longer to cook and was fine to play. What else doesn't work? With the risk of sounding dramatic, everything. The game suffers from an overwhelming sense of identity crisis that has it stretched in so many different directions that it becomes bad at everything. The identity crisis was not unique to Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, but the series as a whole, and arguably the horror game genre at the time. 3 years before Operation Raccoon City, Resident Evil 5 had taken the faster paced action of the fourth installment and had run with it, becoming a full thriller co-op experience that took you at breakneck pace through remote parts of fictional African countries and tasked you to blow the enemies away. Resident Evil 5 provided a satisfying romp that friends could enjoy now together, utilising the online systems that the 360 and PS3 had now brought to the masses, and was hugely successful. However, it felt a bit out of kilter with many of the series' fans, including myself, as it seemed to have abandoned all of its survival horror heritage. While the games have always had a huge sense of flamboyance, it was always grounded on a sense of true horror suspense. Even in Resident Evil 4 that broke away from the fixed camera angles, you had to explore on your own through a hostile world full of traps and puzzles. You may have had more agency and firepower, but it was still you against the world. To Capcom's credit, this was recognised, and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City is a result of this attempt to try and give service to old school fans while still trying to profit off the demand of fast-paced online shooters. The other 2012 title, Resident Evil 6, was also an unfortunate victim of this approach. The setting is a clear nod to older fans. We are returning to where it all began. Raccoon City and the monsters that lay within it are so influential and nostalgic that it can be not escaped to this day. Even the upcoming Resident Evil 9 is to be set amongst its ruins. But this fundamentally misunderstands what a lot of fans were missing. They weren't missing Raccoon City or lickers and hunters, they weren't missing tank controls and fixed camera angles. Even zombies could be absent if the game had the true survival horror tone and tension. Fans had to turn to smaller indie titles that had filled this want, such as Amnesia. But instead, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City went with the faster paced shooter action, and even that could have worked if it was more focused. There's not only a fully co-op campaign, but also ranked online matches. At this point, only one series had properly pulled off nailing that kind of ambition, and that was Halo. They had a lot more ties to the console's company and several games worth of experience to provide the level of quality needed to make a first-person shooting experience fun both cooperatively and competitively. Call of Duty was an extremely popular title at the time, and and the way that you rank up your profile and unlock new equipment is clearly modelled on these titles, but Call of Duty also benefited from years of FPS development experience and was nearly solely focused on the fluidity and responsiveness needed to make online competitiveness work. Resident Evil, Operation Raccoon City was trying to be Left 4 Dead, Gears of War, Call of Duty, all while trying to placate horror fans when achieving just one of these goals was just a magnificent feat. By trying to go in all these different directions, they just got a janky shooter that doesn't work well enough to play competitively, doesn't have enough unique gameplay to justify 4 friends spending full price to play it together, and hasn't got the feeling of the Raccoon City based games in order to scratch the itch of the older games fan base. It's simply a mess. But that doesn't mean we should chuck the baby out with the bathwater, as there's still a gem of an idea buried beneath. Raccoon City is the iconic zombie-filled city. It is a location that is known purely for its fall. Its tragedy is rife with opportunities for games to unfold the lives of ordinary people when met with extraordinary horror. Ever since we dipped our toes into this location in 1998, we have wanted to see more, and the best we got since the main titles was Outbreak, a game ahead of its time for better and worse. Outbreak had you trail through scenarios as a select group of survivors with their own unique abilities. You had to scavenge, problem solve and survive, all in real time against the odds. The issue it had was that it was extremely difficult for new players. It had ridiculous load times and was designed for an online console audience that just didn't exist outside of Japan. Despite being beloved as everything fans wanted in a game, it didn't sell well, and the idea of old school survival but online was dropped. Some hoped that Operation Raccoon City would be a return to this. An Outbreak with dedicated servers and less loading times would have been killer, but I think that Operation Raccoon City also offered something else too. An opportunity to explore Umbrella. Some horror is expressed in the deep fear of the unknown and absurd. Silent Hill takes this approach, manipulating reality, making you second guess everything you see. Your inner fears are pulled around and force you to face them. Resident Evil's horror is rooted in something much more concrete, and that is our greed laid bare. When we only had the original 3 titles, we knew that Wesker was a power-hungry fiend that brought many to their doom, but he was just one of many that were fighting amongst each other to come out on top. And if you were to point to a main antagonist, it was Umbrella, a faceless company that fostered a culture of profit over people, that saw unimaginable evil as an opportunity for success, that didn't just refuse to take accountability for the annihilation of a city, but saw it as an opportunity. This callous evil that we can see inklings of in our own real world. That is Resident Evil. Operation Raccoon City does try its best at addressing this, but it should have been its identity. You are supposed to be the bad guys. Raccoon City didn't just have an outbreak of zombies, it was wiped completely off the map. Because of Umbrella. We needed to feel that. The scenarios do have you focused on collecting data and eliminating special ops from retrieving evidence, but it goes out of its way to make the Wolfpack redeemable, even letting you choose to side with Leon and Claire at the end. Not only does this break any canon, but it makes the Wolfpack just another group just doing their best. No, we are the big bad. We are the reason Raccoon City had only a handful of survivors. The one simple change I would make then would be to make the Wolfpack the real Umbrella Spec Op group it was supposed to be. For a covert group, too many individuals see our face and even have conversations with us. No, that should not be allowed. All survivors that are alerted to us must be neutralized. This means removing the governmental forces that we are fighting against, as it makes no sense that we have constant firefights with them while still remaining undercover. Instead, the antagonist of the game should be the city itself. Operation Raccoon City does try to make the streets feel different than a war game. You have the monsters of the main games around you, and it makes the terrain much more dangerous. You can use this to your advantage and lead bioweapons towards your foes. The focus on this is not insignificant, with there being unique abilities and directional sound that is intended as a way to track and manipulate your enemies. I'm also sure that this is one of the reasons the game runs so badly. This system would be so good if the enemies were much more dangerous and less of a side note in the gameplay. A real Umbrella Spec Ops team would be much more methodical in how it handled its enemies, avoiding them when possible and using them against each other where possible. And if you fail to do this, then you should be overwhelmed by them. There is a scene early on in the game where we see Nikolai from Resident Evil 3. He shoots a fellow USBC soldier in order to distract and slow the zombies. It is also somewhat used to show what an evil man he is, but we should be that evil. We should have to handicap the survivors we come across and lead them to their unnecessary doom. We should have to betray Umbrella employees who think we are just there for their retrieval and use every nasty trick in the book work to survive the horrors of Raccoon City. It's in the name. You could argue that this was more than one small change, but I kind of used that one change that would end up forcing others, but feel free to argue that in the comments. Also, let me know of other games that you would make changes to and what games you would like me to analyse in the future. I've been bobsgammon. See you next time.